to be here at our pavilion. As this is thematic Energy Day, we'll be starting our session with a focus on innovation in affordable and sustainable cooling. I would now like to request Ms. Prima Madan from NRDC to moderate this session. Prima, you have the floor.
Very good afternoon, everyone. I am Prima Madan, working as Senior Advocate, Cooling and Efficiency with the Natural Resources Defense Council. It's my immense pleasure to welcome you all at this beautiful pavilion that our partners, UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub, have put together. At this side event, we are going to talk about building resilience to extreme heat and ensuring access to sustainable cooling. Really two sides of the same coin. And I'm sure all of us know this. It's no new facts for us. The last 8 years have been the hottest years on record. The year 2023 has been the hottest year on record so far. So we have to, in a way, prepare for some level of heat that we will have to be prepared for and build resilience and come with solutions that help us cope with that heat and provide access to cooling in these inevitable circumstances. So that's the overall theme. We have an eminent panel across the spectrum, from government, from civil society, from academia, and also experts working on the Montreal Protocol. So with that, I welcome you all, and I will pass on to Ms. Deepa Bagai, our country head with Natural Resources Defense Council, India, to welcome and set the context for our discussion today.
Podium. I'll give this to Nikhil. Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. It is such a privilege for me to welcome all of you to this very important session. And why I call it a very important session is that the effect of heat is being felt by all of us every day in greater measure than ever before. If you step out now, out in the heat, you will realize how intense it is. And if at the same time you just go into the shade, you realize what a big difference it can make. And this heat is not going away anywhere. We are feeling it every single day, but statistics tell the same story. The last 8 years have been the hottest years on the planet. And 2023 was indeed the hottest ever recorded. So clearly, this is a problem that is getting bigger and getting worse. Heat risk is becoming more dangerous. It is becoming a bigger challenge. And wider access to sustainable cooling is becoming more important than ever before. And it is not only a problem of the heat-stressed world, as we like to call it. It's no longer a problem of the Asian countries, the countries around the equator, North Africa, South Asia. No. The summer before last, I was in Bonn, and my colleagues from UNFCCC who are sitting here will remember that the level of the Rhine had gone down to reveal hunger stones. But more importantly, for people like me who was there visiting, we were going looking for a fan and we couldn't find it. There were long queues for people trying to buy a fan. Forget about air conditioning. There were colleagues from UNFCCC who were saying that they will have to go into the office because the office is air conditioned, whereas their homes do not have access to cooling. So if a country like Germany and a city like Bonn could feel that, imagine the intensity of that heat and how to cope with it in cities in my country, in India. So turning to India, what I can say is that in India, heat-stressed living has just become so difficult, and cooling is no longer a luxury. When I was growing up, somebody with an air conditioner was, someone who belonged to another strata of society. And even today, only 10% of Indians have air conditioning. So what we do need is access to cooling. Some kind of cooling is absolutely essential and imperative, no longer a luxury. For people who have access to air conditioning, it's one thing. But we have people in India who, on any given day, however hot it might be, 48 degrees in the shade, and they have to be outdoors because they are construction workers, they are hawkers, they are street cleaners. Where are the options for these people? What is it that we are doing to make sure that they have access to some kind of cooling? And heating and cooling are really two sides of the same coin. As economic development happens, as aspirations grow, air conditioning market is growing exponentially. And the quality of that air conditioning, the stress that air conditioning would create on climate, on energy systems, on energy efficiency, itself is a whole story that we cannot afford to go further with. So given that both the heat and the cooling are such huge challenges, it is so important for us to look for solutions that are viable, sustainable, and are actually not in the realm of luxury, but in the realm of everyday living. So active cooling, appliances, but also simple cooling solutions which exist, and if they don't, we have to find them. So that is why we are here today. We are here today to highlight that actionable solutions exist. Where are those actionable solutions? How can they be made better? I'm absolutely delighted and honored that we have here a panel which will feature a member from the National Disaster Management Authority of India, the highest policy-making body on heat. So Dr. Krishna Vats is here on the one hand. On the other, we have Siraj, who is actually working to make that happen in the slums of Jodhpur, where a lot of these people are there. So together, from this range of experts that we will soon be having on the stage to address this issue, will emerge the solutions. We need definitely more concentrated global action on addressing these challenges to strengthen the public health response to these intensifying climate hazards. And heat is a hazard that we have to address, certainly in a country like mine, but now increasingly all over the globe. So it is no longer a problem that we can afford to ignore. It is no longer about luxury, it's about life and death, it's about survival. So given the fact that it is a problem that is looming before us, it is a problem that is intensifying with every summer, it is opportune and important that we must address it. We must address it here and now, and we must address it at every different level. I really hope that we will be able to benefit from today's discussion, to be able to find joint actions that will be able to help us make the world a cooler world for those who are stressed by heat, and give solutions that can lead to them after a very hot day outdoor to be able to at least sleep in comfort. I just want for one more minute to take your time to share a story of Gujarat, where I was last summer. The women of the house, because of societal reasons, had to sleep indoors. The men could at least drag their charpoys, their little cots outside and be outdoor. But for the women, those rooms were like furnaces. I mean, believe me, when I was told that I would have to sleep in that room, I was like, I'm sure I will be awake all night. But what of those women who have to be awake all night for many, many nights? It's those people that we have to think about, as much as we have to think about the big air conditioning solutions that we have. So I'm grateful and I'm honored that we have people here who will be able to move us in that direction. And before I conclude and invite all our esteemed, distinguished panelists to the stage, I would just like to recite a couplet from the Urdu language by a poet called Athar Navis. And I will translate for those who do not understand Urdu. It's very simple. ये धूप तो हर रुख से परेशान करेगी. We have come to a time when this heat will now trouble us in every which way. ये धूप तो हर रुख से परेशान करेगी. अब ढूंढने पड़ेंगे दीवारों के साए. We will have to find shades, we will have to find solutions in the shades of walls. So this really, in a sense, encapsulates both the intensity of the problem and the solutions which will have to be found from around us. So with that, I thank you for being here, and I'm grateful and honored to be here with you, looking for solutions to a very important global problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deepa, for laying that context in the most beautiful way. It is a privilege for us to have with us Mr. Krishna Vats, who's the member at the National Disaster Management Authority, Government of India. Please, sir, I invite you on stage. NDMA has been really at the forefront of building heat resilience in India, and had been really done commendable leadership in advancing action on heat resilience. So, sir, it'll be great to hear from you how NDMA has been prioritizing action on heat and advancing really action at the state level through the national leadership. So, over to you, sir.
It's working? No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's working now. Yeah. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's such a pleasure to be here and sharing some of the reflections from the work that we are doing in India. This is an issue which is becoming more and more critical every year, and this has several dimensions. Of course, dimensions related to productivity, health, longevity, mortality, and the intensity of heat wave is increasing across the country. So we are working at 3 levels. One at the national level, where we have issued the guidelines for developing heat action plans. And it has the support at the highest level. The Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, is himself very interested in the preparedness for heat wave. He conducts meetings at his own level to supervise how we are contributing to the heat wave mitigation, preparedness and mitigation plan. So one, we are developing the guidelines and sharing it with all the states and cities. The second, that we work with the states that they develop the heat action plans. So we have developed the templates for the heat action plans, and all the cities are preparing heat action plans. Districts are preparing heat action plans. So we now have large number of heat action plans being developed every year. And this has increased some awareness and familiarity, how to go about preparing heat action plans, and how to include certain activities which help the administration, the government in dealing with heat waves better. The third thing is to conduct many more city level studies. How does the heat waves impact the cities? Impact certain parts of the cities compared to the others. So for example, those cities which are more densely populated, they have substandard housing, or they have less permeable space. Those are the cities, those parts of the city are likely to get more affected. It is also a very class-specific hazard. The people from the lower income groups are far more affected. The people living with substandard housing, particularly the quality of roof, is a very, very important determinant of the way the people experience heat waves. So we have some more insights from these studies that are being conducted across the country. And we have now developed a typology of the interventions. Those typologies, of course, vary, have a wide range from the health to the school hours, to the work hours, and to the kind of interventions that are needed for dealing with issues like availability of water, shade, shelter, those things. And this has been happening in last 3-4 years, and NRDC is an important partner. It has been a very valuable knowledge partner, and every year we conduct a workshop right in the beginning, and we invite all the states. We share notes, we exchange our experiences, and we try to improve the feasibility of implementation of heat action plan. Where we need to improve is the mitigation part. Preparedness is okay. We are now investing some amount of money in preparedness. Preparedness does not cost a huge amount of money. But when we start actually designing interventions that are aimed at the certain interventions, particularly in the area of shelter, water, those other natural resource-based interventions, those are the areas that require investments. And right now, the channels of investment are not well defined. So this is really the challenge for us. And I think this is a challenge that exists across the cities in the world. While there is a lot of awareness, and the cities are becoming more and more alive to the challenges, where do we begin? How do we invest? Which are the areas? And we need to make these investments in a particular time frame. because they are not to be implemented over, years. They have to be implemented within 1 or 2 months. So the central challenge today is how do we develop heat action plans that could really be implemented on the ground with some amount of knowledge, expertise, and some amount of investment. And that's what we are working towards. We are working on developing a national framework for heat action, which would help the cities and the states and the districts, all of them, to access funding for heat wave mitigation. That's really the goal. That's really the drift of the policy, and we are very keen that all the cities, all the districts prepare heat action plans that are not just limited to preparedness, that go beyond preparedness and identify very specific, context-specific mitigation actions that could be implemented. It should not just be about listing the activities. Of course, it would require pooling of resources. The citizens, the people, they also need to come forward. But extremely important that along with the national governments, along with the local governments, state governments, and the central government, they come together and they invest in this area. And I think over a period of time, in the next 5 years, I anticipate a large number of interventions in heat wave mitigation. So that's where we are. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. And again, thanks for your leadership and highlighting that larger investment and financing is what is needed to really scale some of the interventions that have been brought on ground and then taken forward. Thank you so much. I will now invite Mr. Manish Bapna, President and CEO of NRDC, to say a few words about the global momentum that is really building on heat resilience and cooling. So, Manish, over to you.
Thank you, Prima. Just want to build a lot on the previous speakers with just a couple of fairly straightforward points. The challenge around extreme heat and cooling, everyone in this room recognizes is a profound global challenge. You know the numbers as well as I do in terms of number of people that are affected today, what's happening to the planet. I was struck that the WMO came out and said that 2023, 1.4 degrees centigrade average temperature already, right? What we are experiencing today is worse than what we had anticipated. We know that. We also know that how we tackle cooling, massive climate challenge, 7% of global greenhouse gas emissions are connected to cooling. That's a pretty significant number. And we also know that the issue of equity is at the heart of this issue. We know the people that are creating the problem. We also know the people that are suffering the most. So this is one of those issues where from a health, from a climate, from an equity standpoint, absolutely clear what we need to do globally. The opportunity is actually encouraging because of how much progress we've actually made on the cooling agenda in the past 12 months even. Getting the cooling pledge up and running, seeing countries take a number of steps, seeing philanthropy commit $450 million towards addressing non-CO2 gases with a particular focus on HFCs is encouraging. So we're starting to see some momentum build, but we have a lot more to do, right? I mean, this should be on the main stage with a full room. How do we get there in 2 or 3 years? That's what we should be asking ourselves, because we know both if we get it wrong, what it means, and if we get it right, what it means, requires this to be a main stage issue. The last thing is that I'm really excited about this session because just like you were talking about, we're going to get concrete about what's actually working on the ground. What are the technologies? What are the financing needs? How do we think about capacity of institutions at different levels? How do we think about governance? It's really critical for us to understand what can work and how we get to scale. And what's exciting about this panel is we actually will now have some real proof points from different places around the world about what works or what can work. And now it's upon us to see how we can build on that foundation and bring this to a place that we all in this room recognize it deserves. So delighted to be here with all of you for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Manish. And as a next step to taking a cue from what you said on solutions, so we are going to be releasing a fact sheet on one such solution for combating heat and building resilience to extreme heat. That's on cool roofs. So we'll be releasing a fact sheet on cool roofs, which really tells a story of one of the first states in India to release a statewide cool roof policy. And just to tell you a little bit more about this, the seeds of this policy was really sowed in 2017 with initial pilots demonstrations that were conducted on urban slum roofs of cool membranes in partnership with the city government and our local partners, Administrative Staff College of India, IIIT Hyderabad. The policy is very focused in its nature. It has its 5-year time horizon looking to implement 300 square kilometers of cool roofs, and as a result of which nearly 600 million kilowatt hours of electricity would be saved in the state. And what we have done is to, first of all, tell the story of the policy, how this came about, and then put down some guiding principles for other states to follow to draft and implement such a policy, largely with the objective of scaling such solutions to more and more geographies. So with that, I request our dignitaries on the stage to please release the fact sheet by holding it up, and let's click a picture. Great. Thank you so much. Thanks. Yeah. We will now get into the panel discussion talking about solutions. So please, if I may, and thank you so much to Krishna sir, Deepa ma'am, and Manish. Thank you. I request the panelists for our session to please join us on stage. And I'm going to also join you on the comfortable sofa just because it'll be better to have a conversation there. Do we have Elizabeth here as well? Yes, there she is. Yeah. And Mahesh, please join us on stage as well. Great. So I'm going to lay a bit of a context. Again, I think we have done a lot of context laying out before, but as Manish also highlighted, I think we have come a long way since last year in terms of highlighting cooling and heat and action on heat. It was a conversation we actually started last year at this pavilion with our partners on how can we scale and bring global attention to cooling. And it's very heartening to see the prominence of cooling at this COP with the cooling pledge that was released earlier on in the day, which again talks about targets focusing on both active and passive solutions at national, state, and even by the private sector to some extent. And earlier in the week, NRDC and partners had focused on a conversation on technological solutions that targeted really refrigerant-based cooling, which are extremely important, as we all know, in terms of emission potential. Today, we want to talk about solutions which are more people-centric, focusing on the most vulnerable, where access to cooling is a challenge. And how do we target those vulnerable pockets in states and cities, and even in the rural areas, to build their resilience to the heat which is inevitable and provide that access to cooling. So that's a bit of a context. We have a very eminent set of speakers here, and we also have a video message that we'll play in the course of the panel. But to get us started, I'm going to invite Dr. Mahesh Rajasekar, who's the Urban Resilience Advisor with the Coalition for Disaster Risk Resilient Infrastructure, CDRI, which is really a global partnership of countries coming together to build infrastructure in cities which is resilient. So it'll be great to hear from you how CDRI is prioritizing heat in its portfolio of building the resilient infrastructure, and any lessons that you have so far to share with us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here and talking about one of the most pressing and challenging issues of today, that is heat. And while we all experience it, feel it, it's a much more complex phenomena to address it, because you have to have solutions which are top-down and which are bottom-up. And heat is one thing, even though we all keep talking about it, the problem is still not being addressed at various levels. One, I can talk about the simple early warning systems. Whatever we have today, it talks about the temperature, but it doesn't talk about what it's going to impact that particular temperature. We don't have operators, especially for infrastructure, not understanding what that temperature means to them, because 40 degrees as an air surface temperature is different for somebody who's operating train tracks, which may heat up to 80 or 90 degrees centigrades. And also normal mobility, the asphalt roads, the bitumen roads have a different reflective performance, which these temperature, the air surface temperature doesn't really correspond to. This year, it was one of the hottest year. We exceeded certain parameters which we thought we are going to experience in 2030. So what we are doing right now, or what we are experiencing right now, is unprecedented. It's something which we have not experienced in the past 70, 80, 90 years since the instrumental records are in place. That means that we still are not looking at the land surface temperature, we are still looking at the air surface temperature, and we are working out much of our models towards it. In this context, I'll just jump to what CDRI has been doing. CDRI is going to launch its urban strategy on 10th. That is going to focus specifically on heat and flood. These are the two risks which are affecting the urban areas. Recently, we did an analysis of 170 countries, and we looked at, in terms of the loss and damage, the probabilistic loss and damage which country governments are about to experience. 70% of the loss is going to come from hydromet events. And heat is going to play a significant role, not only in terms of heating of the land, but the heating of the sea leading to more precipitations and cyclones. So heat is going to have a dual impact, and better understanding it, better policy guidelines are something which we are targeting towards our urban strategy, and we want to come up with data tools more in terms of scaling the existing data tools and technologies to make sure that it reaches the larger member countries, but also the cities across the world. I'll stop here, but we'll be glad to talk about some of it in detail.
Thank you so much, Mahesh, for those remarks. I think the point that you make on heat playing a big role in loss and damage, I think is very relatable to the conversation that is happening at this COP as well, which was started last year in terms of the loss and damage fund to be set up. So yes, I think we have to find little stronger ways how those can be strengthened and tapped into as we get along. So thanks for sharing that. I will now turn to actually a video message from Mr. Vishal Kapoor, who is the Chief Executive Officer at the Energy Efficiency Services Limited, ESL, in India. ESL is a premier public sector organization working on energy efficient solutions. And they were instrumental in fact, implementing the largest efficient lighting program in India, leading to several electricity savings. They are now prioritizing cooling in their portfolio. Was to join in. Would be here. So can we have the video, please?
Distinguished delegates, I extend a warm greeting to each one of you. It is indeed an honor to address this significant summit, albeit virtually, and engage in a discourse on the pivotal nexus of energy, the future sustainability of our planet, and the imperative for effective cooling solutions. In our contemporary era, millions across the globe confront the peril of heat-related fatalities, with projections indicating a disturbing escalation to 90,000 premature deaths annually by 2030 and a staggering 255,000 by 2050. While we are cognizant of the potential adverse effects of climate change-induced heat waves, true understanding only dawns upon us when we directly face these challenges. The repercussions of inaction could prove dire, and the urgency to simulate such scenarios becomes very apparent. The compelling narrative presented in Kim Stanley Robinson's science fiction publication, The Ministry of Future, vividly portraying an apocalyptic heat wave in India, served as a poignant wake-up call for me personally. The prevalent extreme weather events globally, including India's persistent heat waves, serve as an unequivocal indicator that cooling solutions are not a mere indulgence anymore, but an imperative necessity. India, in a commendable move in 2019, embarked upon a pioneering journey with the India Cooling Action Plan, setting ambitious targets to curtail cooling energy requirements by 25 to 40% by 2037-38, embracing affordable, effective, and energy-efficient solutions. Acknowledging the pivotal role of the humble fan, a household staple in India, the ICAP envisages a 9-fold surge in the demand for cooling solutions by 2037, presenting a monumental opportunity to enhance the energy efficiency of India's ceiling fan market. ESL at the G20 summit in Goa recently inaugurated the Energy Efficient Fans program, aspiring to deploy 10 million energy efficient fans across India. This initiative seamlessly aligns with the ICAP's overarching mission, aspiring to slash the nation's energy consumption by almost 15%. At ESL, we proudly champion the world's largest energy efficiency portfolio, garnering acclaim from the esteemed institutions such as the World Bank and the IEA. Our innovative demand aggregation model has successfully fostered robust markets for diverse energy efficient products. I firmly believe that pan-institution partnerships, including governments, civil society, non-profits, for-profits, etc., hold a transformative potential for cooling infrastructure. Governments provide essential policy direction, while the private sector, through innovation and strategic investments, plays a pivotal role. And the NGOs, non-profits, provide grounds-up and intellectual support. Executing performance contracts via ESL, companies like ESL, serves as a catalyst for expeditious and widespread implementation of energy efficiency projects. Our collective endeavors today bear the responsibility of shaping the future for generations to come. Let us confront the climate challenge unitedly, as only together can we effectively address its complexities. In conclusion, I express my gratitude to each one of you, wish you a fruitful day ahead, and extend early wishes for a prosperous new year. Thank you.
Thank you. ESL's bulk procurement programs have really been instrumental in moving the market towards efficient technologies. And as Mr. Kapoor mentioned, they have an upcoming program on 10 million ceiling fans in India. So India is going to need 900 million ceiling fans. So the market potential is huge. So efficiency of that equipment, it's an equipment of necessity in every household in India. So targeting those in a most effective way is critical. We do have some sound. So I'm going to request so that our audience can hear us better. this was loud, but anyway, yeah. So moving to our next speaker, Ms. Elizabeth Wange Shege, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, who's the Energy Efficiency and Cooling Specialist at the Sustainable Energy for All. And SE for All has been really instrumental on focusing on access to cooling solutions. Or data on chilling prospects that you publish has been instrumental for access to cooling. And you've also focused on tapping on the power that SE for All has been doing on tapping the power of nature, the challenge that you have been running, and the lessons from that challenge. Yeah.
Thank you for having me here, Elizabeth Wangeshi Shege, so that's quite correct. First of all, SE for All, well known for the SDG 7 ambition and creating and galvanizing action around SDG 7.1, 2, and 3, so that the tripling opportunity of energy was also an opportunity to do more on cooling, especially in Africa when you talk about access to electricity. We know the numbers, we've been doing the studies, but at the same time we saw that there is a blind spot on cooling. And especially in emerging countries that we are a part of, we have set up our strategy as an opportunity to have country-led action, as much as we have our global advocacy work as well. So part of the initiatives we actually do on innovation for cooling, number one, simple, straightforward, awareness. It's interesting that in a warming world, we're not really talking about cooling, and we have a global cooling pledge at COP28, 28 years after COP1. And on the basis of that as well, is the backing financial investment elements around it. The data comes out, and thank you for pointing out this being the hottest year. And I firmly believe that this is going to happen again and again and again. We're seeing the data towards that. But also for this session, we've seen vulnerable communities. We keep saying we're not leaving anyone behind, but have been left behind. Number one, before we even talk about equipment and efficiency of equipment, is where the people live. The first question we asked ourselves as SE for All is, where are the people? Yes, there's urban centers, but urban centers are the ones that are planned for. Spatial designs and spatial planning of countries that last over 30 years. Most of them are outdated. They won't take in the sustainable IPCC climatic data to update with the data from today. For example, if I take Kenya, we have Nairobi, the city center. Around Nairobi, you'll find the planned buildings, but then you'll find a lot of informal buildings as well. So what we've done with our partners, for example, IBM, is to say, where are we planning for the energy demand? If we just plan for the cities and forget the informal sectors, then we're exacerbating the problem. So we've started looking, as one of the programs is to use AI, use satellite, to look at what's been happening over the last 15, 20 years. We build and plan cities, then informal settlements happen, and they keep growing, and they're stepping of energy demand. But at the same time, when we're planning the cities, what is the basis of orientation? Something as simple as that. What is the climate in these areas? What is the climatic effect? So overlapping with technology to see what's actually happening and the opportunity to design with passive design measures. So before I even talk about how much, I talk about what are we doing with the climate that we have and what are we doing to design for future climate. A lot of the standards, design standards and guidelines that have been written so far are retrospective. So they live for 10 years and they're updated, but by the time they're updated and they're ready for use, climate has changed. So we're also working with designers, spatial planners, and town planners as well, for the reconsideration of planning our cities to take advantage of passive design measures. Those include, natural ventilation, using the blue economy as well for cooling, and vegetation. And for the first time, you'll see that the energy conversation has crossed over to nature solutions nature-based solutions. And the commitments that come out of these countries to say, for example, in Kenya, we've said we're going to plant 15 billion trees. That's great, but also what can we do immediately? Because we can't sit back and wait for the trees to grow. So one of the aspects around collaboration is that we have a lot of partners. We have the Cool Coalition, we have UNEP, RMI, WRI, and others as well. We saw the need to take the conversation from the global conversation, from national to local action. And this is why we're part of the Nature for Cool Cities Challenge. And one of the first cities or counties, so to speak, is from Kenya. It's called Homa Bay County. And the governor actually came on board to say, the problem is at my doorstep. My county is next to Lake Victoria. So we deal with dry heat and humidity. But at the same time, we have people who live below poverty lines. They fish every day. The fish goes bad by the end of the day. So I have another issue, food security. So this is where cooling now starts breaking down from just space heating to opportunities around cold chains. So getting the fish and actually keeping it so that the people can have food security around that. Beyond that, we learned something from the pandemic. We lost a lot of vaccines. They would get to the port of Kenya in Mombasa. By the time they come across to Kisumu, they're gone. We don't have minus 20 degrees centigrade cold chains to keep vaccines to the temperature that they need to have. So SA for All, looking at cooling in those three various elements and adding the challenges is definitely to bring the action to the ground and also talking about tripling of investment. So when you talk about investment, some of the work we're also doing is part of the mission efficiency marketplace. We say we can't talk about energy efficiency on its own without bringing cooling to the table. So energy efficiency and cooling has a marketplace. We've started an investment workshop where we're working on a project pipeline and project readiness. Because also sitting at this position, you have financiers who say, we have money, but there's no bankable projects. And at the same time, we're on the ground, we can see the projects, or we can see the opportunities of creating these projects. Last but not least, not forgetting the youth. We have a This Is Cool challenge. And actually today, this afternoon, we're going to award top 3 youth with their innovations globally. Last year, we had over 100 entries globally. This year, we've had over 250 from the youth. We even have a 16-year-old trying to get in because she is part of their finalists. So we're seeing that adaptive solutions, innovations are actually coming in from the youth themselves, and we're supporting that. Just to start off with that. Thank you.
Sharing that was a range of solutions right there. And so rightly highlighted that we need multiple solutions to work, looking at health, productivity, and thermal comfort at the city level. So thanks for the work that SC for All has been doing. And ground-level action, extremely important. And with that, I'm going to come to our next speaker, Mr. Siraj Hirani, who's a senior program management specialist at Mahila Housing Trust. MHT has been really working on the ground, engaging with the communities on the ground to implement solutions across topics at the urban level, but more recently on heat and cooling. And I will request you to share some of the work that you have been doing, and NRDC has been partnering with MHT for several years. So,
thank you, Primaji. First of all, thanks NRDC for, I think, for organizing the panel discussion on such an important topic. I think it's not only important for India, but globally, I think it is an issue that everybody is facing, and we need to talk about solutions. I think there is enough things has been spoken about the intensity and the frequency of heat wave. So first of all, thanks NRDC. So what I'm going to do, I think in next 5 to 7 minutes, I will talk about the solutions that Mahila Housing Seva Trust and MHT has been jointly implementing in city of Jodhpur as a part of Jodhpur Heat Action Plan. So I think this is a very unique plan in a way. I think we started a session where we said that there are many heat action plans developed in India, and they have really worked well. There are gaps that we need to address. But I think this is a very unique heat action plan in a couple of ways, which I will highlight. First thing is that I think this was the first plan which emerged actually from the community. So in 2022, when we are having the consultation meeting with the women leaders from slums, they started talking about, so we were actually working there on the issues of water, sanitation, access to energy, and slum upgradation. But during those meetings, there were many slums, women from the many slums who started talking about issues related to heat. They started talking about increasing incident of illness and hospitalization in the families. They started talking about the expenditure that they are incurring for hospitalization of their family members. Women who are home-based workers, they started talking about that it's not possible for them from last 2 to 3 summers to work 5 to 6 hours in a day, which they were able to do it earlier. Now they stop working in the afternoon for 2 to 3 hours, which has actually reduced their productivity and the income by 20 to 30%. And these were serious issues. And what was more unfortunate was that they were not having enough information about what are the potential solutions to this problem. And that was the time that Mahila Housing Seva Trust decided that it is an important issue and we need to take up with the government. So Mahila Housing Seva Trust, in partnership with National NRDC, I think we organized a first consultation meeting with the local administration. And that was in, I think, June 2022, where we invited the Municipal Commissioner of Jodhpur Nagar Nigam North, and there were another 24 stakeholders from different government departments, private sector, academic institution, and civil society organization. And these women leaders from the slum areas were actually invited to present their issues with the government. They presented their issues, and it was very kind of then municipal commissioner who on the same forum announced that now it's the time that we start working on a heat action plan. And he made a commitment to the women from the slum areas that he will come up with a heat action plan in next 1 year. So I think, first of all, I would like to highlight this was probably the first heat action plan which was demanded by the citizen, which were demanded by the women from the slum area, that this is an important issue for us. Yeah, water and sanitation is important, but heat has become a survival issue for us. And after that meeting, the municipal commissioner approached NRDC and Mahila Housing Seva Trust seeking the technical support in developing this heat action plan. Because I think there is a lot of interest from the government to develop heat action plan, but technical resources that you require at a local level to come up with a technically robust heat action plan is lacking. Second, what our previous speaker also talked about, financial resources required for implementation of the heat action plan. So I think that it was at that time that Mahila Housing Seva Trust, NRDC, and Jodhpur Nagar Nigam actually entered into a memorandum of understanding to develop this heat action plan. The first step that we did in developing a heat action plan was to carry out a very comprehensive heat risk assessment for the city of the Jodhpur. And again, this was a very interesting and unique way. So we started with using a technology for like GIS and remote sensing to understand the heat exposure of cities. So definitely entire city is facing the heat issue, but there are pockets in the cities that we were referring to where population is very dense or where there are a lot of heat island impact that we are seeing, to identify hotspots in the cities. So that was the first exercise that we carried out. I think second exercise, and which was really very, very value addition, was actually collecting the data from the ground. So what Mahila Housing Seva Trust did was actually engage the women leaders who came up with these issues from the slums to be part as a data collector. So we trained them that, okay, can you collect the vulnerability data, local vulnerability data, and they collected the data in terms of housing condition, access to water, the kind of the livelihood that we are seeing in the slum areas. And we used that data. They also collected the data in terms of what is the existing adaptive capacity existing within these urban slum dwellers. So exposure data plus this population sensitivity data and the current adaptation capacity data helped us to understand that who is at most risk within the city when we are talking about heat exposure or heat hazard. And the entire plan, the action plan that was developed was focused on the most vulnerable population. So that's number one. Then we started working on the solutions, that what are the important solutions that is important. And as you can see in the screen that we had this zone, that red high zone, moderate zone, and the low zone in the city. And the numbers that you are seeing are the slum settlements in the city of the Jodhpur North. Oh, yeah. No, it's not working. Yeah. Second important component of the heat action plan was early warning system. So when we are carrying out the consultation meeting with the women leaders from the slum area, we got to know that there is a robust system by Indian Meteorological Department as far as dissemination of the early warning system is concerned till the district administration. But this, the warning that are disseminated by Indian Meteorological Department, it doesn't reach out to the people in the slum areas. There are different issues related to it. So there is a literacy level, there is an access to the technology. So I think first thing that we did was that how we can make sure that there is a last mile connectivity with the most vulnerable population as far as the heat early warning system is concerned. And through this community action group, we formed the WhatsApp groups where they were receiving the warning from the Indian Meteorological Department directly in their WhatsApp groups. These women were trained in terms of how this warning can be further disseminated to the households in the slum areas. As you can see in the picture, they had these hoardings where warnings were actually disseminated in the slum areas. And that's how we connected the most vulnerable population to the early warning system. I think second intervention that we planned was how we can make sure that houses, the houses of these slum dwellers are thermally more comfortable. And that's where we identified this solar reflective white paint, which is a passive cooling technology available in the market. And it is working very well when the solar reflective white paints are actually applied on the roof. It reduces the inside temperature by 3 to 4 degrees Celsius. So we selected the slums that were at high risk and the solar reflective white paint were applied. We installed the thermometer in these houses to understand that what is the impact of the solar reflective white paint. Women were trained in terms of taking temperature where these solar reflective white paints are applied and in a control sample where the solar reflective white paint were not applied. And it came out from the study that it reduces the inside temperature by at least 4 to 5 degrees Celsius. So entire idea is that how you are engaging the citizens in the adaptation, climate adaptation or heat adaptation intervention. The third intervention that we did, and this was very interesting, I think, and we also talked about it in the initial part of our discussion, that when you talk about people who are exposed to heat during summer also are the people who are vegetable vendors, people who are construction workers, people who are working on the mining sites. They don't have an option, but they have to work full day even in the hot summers. So here what we have designed is the cooling station. And this cooling station has been designed, this cooling station is going to work on a passive energy. It basically has an inputs in terms of design and the building materials that are used. And this cooling station will actually provide the thermal comfort. It will reduce the temperature inside the cooling station by 5 to 7 degrees Celsius. This cooling station will be installed in next summer in the areas where we have maximum footfalls from the vegetable vendors and the construction worker. And this will give an opportunity for the people who are high risk to actually come down in the cooling station, spend some 30-45 minutes, provide the comfort to their body to make sure that they are not facing issues related to heat stroke. And again, this will be piloted. This is in the design phase, and we are hoping to pilot it in next March 2024. Next. And the final thing, I think, what we are working is on the nature-based solution. So we, along with, so NRDC and the Mahila Housing Seva Trust, along with the different department of the Jodhpur Nagar Nigam, we have identified the open spaces which are and surrounding the cities. And we have now started working on it, that how these open spaces can be converted into oxygen park or the green parks or the small patches of urban forest to reduce the heat island effect in the cities. And this is the first of the site that we have started working on it, and hopefully it will be completed by early monsoon next year. So idea is that these are the few interventions that I am presenting. This is a plan that we developed only in March 2023. We are into this journey for, I think, almost 9 to 10 months. And I will say that this plan has been unique in a couple of ways. First of all, I think the partnership is extremely important. That when you talk about a plan that is actionable, it's important that citizen and government are coming together. The civil society organization who has the capacity to engage the most vulnerable population plays an important role. At the same time, the organization like NRDC that brings in the expertise of cooling and the technical expertise in terms of risk assessment plays a very important role when you talk about the heat action plan. So I think partnership is important, citizen engagement is important, and the challenge that lies ahead is that how we can mobilize resources for the actions that have been identified in the plan. So I will end it here, and happy to take up any questions at a later stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Siraz Bhai. I think you've concluded it very well in terms of partnership. You highlighted and concluded very well by highlighting partnerships, data, and financing. So thank you. I know we have paucity of time, but we do have one more speaker, and I'm going to zoom out a bit while posing a question to Avipsa Mahapatra, who is the climate campaign director at the Environmental Investigation Agency and has been working on Montreal Protocol, the treaty that saved the ozone layer and is now working to save the climate for over 10 years. And Montreal Protocol has been focused more on refrigerant-based cooling and looking at phasing down, phasing out of ozone depleting and global warming potential refrigerants. So Avipsa, what lessons do you have for us on this side of the world on access to cooling?
Thank you, Prima. I will turn your question around a little bit, and I'm so excited that we are in the Innovation Hub, because what I'm hearing from this room are innovative solutions that kind of need to go back to the Montreal Protocol. So the Montreal Protocol, arguably the most successful environmental treaty in the world, has worked for the last 3 decades by capping production of chemicals, refrigerants, that we use in our refrigerators, air conditioners, or for cooling that are not just damaging to our ozone layer, but also are very high global warming, have very high global warming potentials. So what that means, you take a unit of CO2 and you take a unit of this refrigerant, it's usually hundreds to 1,000 times as bad as the same amount of CO2. So if we look at the history of Montreal Protocol, we have been making these incremental changes. We've been on this treadmill of a horrible gas replaced by a slightly less horrible gas, replaced by a maybe not that bad a gas, and maybe a meh gas, and we really need to get off that treadmill. And what I'm hearing in this room is that you don't have to use this 100-year-old technology, which is piping refrigerant through a pipe and then having the vapor compression cycle. That's not the only way you can cool the world. So while the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, which we worked very, very hard for globally, says, we are looking at a global phase down of these climate damaging refrigerants that are being used in most places of the world today, the HFCs, what it doesn't tell you is what is it that you're going to replace it with. And we say that the Montreal Protocol Kigali Amendment could get us 0.5 degree Celsius, could save 0.5 degree Celsius of warming. But that would need a robust implementation and enforcement. And as the Environmental Investigation Agency, what we have seen for 30 years is that you can have the best, most successful treaty, but the proof of the pudding is in the enforcement. So I'll tell you a short, quick story is how EIA, the Environmental Investigation Agency, got into this field was back in the 1990s when CFCs were banned. In the United States, Montreal Protocol has this amazing thing that helps it to be so successful, which is developed countries go first and developing countries go next. So there's a gap between developed countries and developing countries to take up bans or production controls. So when CFCs were banned in the US, they were still legally allowed in Mexico. And back in the 90s, we saw that across the border of US-Mexico, the smuggling of a can of CFC was more lucrative than cocaine. So there were smugglers smuggling CFCs, these refrigerants in a canister, across the border because it was just less dangerous than cocaine. So it just tells you how there are all these layers of what is it that you're implementing. And at the end of the day, are you focusing on this gas or are you focusing on the people? And I'm really excited that today we are having a conversation about the people. Because to me, at the end of the day, we have a very finite climate space. And in that finite climate space, there is absolutely no doubt that we will have growing demand for cooling, and we will need to ensure access to cooling. And in that access to cooling, we will need some amount of climate space. And what that makes us, if you think about it from a step back, what that makes our job harder. But what our real job is ensuring that where we can avoid it, we should absolutely not lock ourselves into any solution, into any refrigerant, or into any technology that is not the lowest climate damaging impact. We simply don't have the climate space for that. And right now, there are countries in the world, like I live in the United States, and if you look at my refrigerator or my air conditioner, is that really doing the least climate damage possible? And we need to all ask ourselves that question so that there is space for the growing cooling demand in the global south. And the last thing I would say is that while I am critiquing the Montreal Protocol sitting here, I must say, we're coming off the annual Montreal Protocol meeting of parties. It's like the COP, but it's much, much, much smaller. And it was one of the most successful meetings because we got the highest replenishment, which is the fund. The Montreal Protocol has an established fund that finances this transition, and this was the highest replenishment of that fund, about $1 billion. So it's not a question of financing. It's not a question in my head of technology. The problem here is making sure that we are choosing the right solution for the right space. So I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Avipsa, for wonderfully explained the work of the Montreal Protocol. And you have again said it right. We must make the first choice that we make has to be the most effective choice that we make for the climate. And that's where we all probably need to move as we think of access to cooling solutions. I would love to ask you all another question because all your remarks have very thought-provoking questions in my head, and also open it up for the audience, but we are really short on time. So I will conclude by thanking all of you for joining us. It has been extremely interesting to hear all of you. So thank you, and I will pass it on to the next session, which also happens to be an NRDC Global Innovation Hub Pavilion session, and very interesting about energy access solutions in rural India. So please stay with us. Thank you.
A very good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all stay with us for this next session, which will focus on putting women at the heart of climate action by mainstreaming gender inclusivity when we talk about energy access. And with this, I kickstart the event. A very good afternoon, everyone. I'm Akanksha Golcha from NRDC India, and on behalf of Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India, UNFCCC Global Innovation Hub, and Natural Resources Defense Council, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to this very important discussion that will focus on putting women at the heart of climate action by mainstreaming gender-inclusive energy access. And this event will also showcase innovative, successful examples of women-led climate-friendly and clean energy solutions that have been implemented, particularly in rural India. We have with us thought leaders and innovators, rural entrepreneurs, and international experts to discuss various approaches to bring the women, especially rural women, at the fulcrum of clean energy transition, while also focusing on equitable access to technology and finance. To kickstart the session, we have Mr. Dinesh Jagdale, Joint Secretary with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Government of India. He has joined us virtually, and I invite you, sir, to please kickstart the event with your inaugural remarks.
Thank you, Akanksha.